You can say hi.
Hi, Dad.
Who's that? Who's Army?
Randy Ben.
Don't mute yourself.
Looks like everybody should be in, I think. Who's this David guy? He's not in. Were you able to get in? Did I let you in? Okay, great. Hello, everybody. I am muting you so that it doesn't get too loud. If you have any questions, though, there's a little comments box over to the side. You should be able to see it on the right side of your screen. Anybody not see it? Looks like we have 8 participants, and I see 6 people. So I'm still getting a little bit used to flipping cameras back and forth. But we should go from the view where you're seeing the things I'm looking at down here on the tray and back to seeing me when you need to, which hopefully you won't have to look at me all that often. But you should all have a bag that looks kind of like this without a sticker on it. And my bag's already been emptied out onto the table. And this is full of your basic dissecting tools. And you should also have this. Does everyone have this? Is anyone missing this little booklet? Yep, hold your booklet up to the screen so I can see. Okay, there's one person that's missing. I can't see theirs. It looks like they're connected to audio. Great. So in this, it's the Do Try These Things at Home. This is pretty exciting. This is our first kit that actually goes out to people to try and do this at home. Normally, you'd be sitting in a classroom with me, and I'd be walking around you, making you really nervous, hovering over you, and helping you cut and dissect things. But in this situation, you get someone that's hopefully not making you as nervous as me, your parent looking over your shoulder. So if you want to walk through, we're going to walk through this book. I'm Shannon Egley. My background, I'm a biomedical neuroscientist. I work at JUMP Simulation, and I'm the anatomical coordinator there. So I run a surgical lab where we help surgeons get better at doing what they're doing so that they can practice surgeries, so that when you have to go to a doctor to get work done, they do it really well before they actually see you. I also am a professor of anatomy, a clinical anatomist at the University of Illinois College of Medicine. So I help teach the doctors about anatomy before they become doctors. So it's kind of fun because I teach them about the anatomy before they're a doctor, and then once they're a doctor or a surgeon, they come and work with me in the lab, and we help them get better at surgeries at the same time. We do a lot of STEM classes. The STEM classes usually revolve around human the body, so anatomy, physiology, experiments with different systems like the musculoskeletal system and how things work, respiratory system and how you breathe, and we like to do hands-on experiments so that you don't get too bored. So we try to treat it like it's not a normal classroom. Hopefully, we'll do the same thing with this. So if you flip to the first page, I could probably switch views too. Yeah. So it's how to think like a scientist. That's kind of the goal with these STEM classes, to get you to think a little bit differently than maybe you've thought before, to open your mind up a little bit differently. And a lot of times when I have students that don't like to think like a scientist, I pick on their parents and I say, it's probably your parents' fault. And I say that as my kid is actually sitting and watching this. But a lot of times when you're a little kid, you ask why a lot. And after a while, parents might get a little annoyed because they're busy doing something and they just say, because I said so. And unfortunately, that's not answering your question the way you want. So with these classes, we try and make you think like a scientist again and always ask why. Why is it you do that the way that you do it? Or why are we making this dissection? Or why does our respiratory system work like that? Instead of just saying you breathe in to live. That's not a good explanation. But why do we breathe in? What do we need from the air that we breathe? Is that the only thing we do when we breathe? Is it just for moving air in? Or what are we getting from it? Which it actually isn't. We're trying to get things out and a lot of other things with your lungs. Like, I don't know if you knew, but your lungs also help pump blood. And if you ever get a chance, Google it and you'll see why. I might actually explain it a little bit too when we look at the shark. But think like a scientist, ask questions, be curious. If you have questions, use that box over there on the side to type in a question, and I'll try and open it up. And if I see a question that I think everybody should look at, oh, there it goes. I'll say the question and give the answer for you, or the best answer that I know, or say that I don't know that and direct you to the place to find it. The second thing, steps to thinking like a scientist. The first thing is observing. So hopefully today you're going to do a lot of observing of a fish, and you're thinking, oh, well, we're going to cut a shark, not a fish, but you're actually cutting a fish. A fish or a shark is a type of fish. There are lots of different types of fish. Shark just happens to be one of them. We always think of it as being different than the fish category, but it's not. So we're going to observe what the body systems are like inside the shark. So we'll talk about the nervous system. Hopefully we'll get a chance to look at the brain, but we'll definitely look at some other senses. So it's smell, it's sight. We'll ask why it does the way it does, or does things the way that it does. Like for instance, your eyes, we'll compare your eyeball to the shark's eyeball. Talk about some things the shark has that you don't have and why it has those. Always question yourself. So when you see something, if you don't understand why we're looking at it or why it works the way it does, try and type over in that chat box over here and I'll help you figure it out. And you might have questions that I never thought of before, so you're kind of helping me too. We can predict. So if we don't know the answer, maybe we can make an educated guess at why it would work that way. We probably won't do a lot of experimenting for your question, but with the experiments, you're doing that today. You're getting your hands dirty and you're playing with things and testing out why things work. So hopefully through this process of experimentation, you'll understand why a fish is different than us and actually why it's similar to us. And we call that comparative anatomy. You'll collect and analyze and report data. We'll do some measurements. We'll find out how big a shark's heart is. We'll measure some of its fins and how long the shark is overall. And we'll compare each person in the group and see what our averages are, or is this something that's normal, or is my fish normal? And then modify and repeat. I don't know if you want to buy a bunch of fish at home, or every time that your parents buy a fish, if you buy the whole fish and then cut it up for them and say, hey, these are different. But that might be a way to repeat it. The next thing you want to do is make sure you have the right tools. And my favorite tool is actually between your ears. So the right tool is your brain, and an inquisitive mind, or a mind that likes to question. Other than that, make sure you have safe tools for doing a job. You wouldn't use a toothbrush to wash your car. You have special tools for that. Kitchen knife to cut down a tree, there's a special tool. So when you're doing dissection, a lot of the tools that we use, you probably have or in your bathroom. We want to make sure we have the right tools, and we provided all those for you. So we do encourage you to explore. I do encourage things that maybe I'm not pointing out, but while you're doing it, doing this experiment, focused and do what we're talking about right now. At the very end, we'll ask questions, and maybe you'll say, hey, can we cut this part of the fish or that part of the fish or shark to explore a little bit more? And naturally, I'm going to say yeah, because I'm curious about cutting different things apart too. But as we're going through, make sure you're using the right tool, the tool that I tell you to use. You're making the right cuts, cutting where I show you. So don't get eager and cut ahead. Wait for me to do the cut, and then you just repeat the cut right after I do it. So one thing at a time. Be prepared. Safety is very important. And inside of your kit, if you want to dump all of your contents out onto the table, here are a few things I want you to pull out right away. First will be your gloves. So we call this PPE, or personal protective equipment. And these gloves are really important. They're all latex free. So I don't know if anybody knows why you use latex free gloves. It's in case you have an allergy, so that your hands don't get all red and irritated if you're allergic to latex. So we found gloves that are actually an oat-based or oatmeal-based glove, which is interesting. They made plastic out of it, or plastic material out of it. So your gloves, you want to put those on. And go ahead and put those on now. If they seem a little big, that's okay. If they seem a little tight, that's okay. As long as they're not ripped, that's the important thing. So I'm actually using the same size glove as you. You're probably a quarter of my age. My hands are probably a lot bigger, but I actually like the tighter gloves because I can feel things. So when we touch the inside of the stomach, you'll actually be able to feel all the bumps on the inside. So if you have a little slack in the tip of the fingers, try and pull it down. Just like in the wintertime when you pull your gloves tight. Roll your finger over. Because I want you to be able to touch everything you possibly can. You want to use as many senses as you can. So sight, of course, looking at everything, checking everything out. If you have to get a little closer, that's fine. You don't want to breathe a lot of the smells in. When we first cut open the fish, you're going to smell some funky things. If it's not something you're comfortable with, tell your parent. And if your mom's Noelle, I'm sure she'll leave the room and say you're on your own. But when you're smelling it, don't get too close. Even though everything that you're going to be working with is safe, breathing in too much of this might make you have a little bit of an upset stomach. So we don't want you to get sick from doing that. So smell is one sensation. If you cut up in the stomach, you might smell other fishy smells because, of course, sharks eat fish. So there might be a fish in your stomach. You might find other things too. You never know what you're going to find inside there. A little seaweed on accident, maybe a fisherman or a small boat in there. Probably not, just kidding. But definitely use your senses: sight, smell, listen. I know it seems a little weird, but when we cut into the skin, if you listen to it, it's different than cutting like other skins. If you were to cut into a pig or some kind of a mammal with a soft skin, a shark's skin actually has a different sound to it. See, taste, please avoid taste. That's the one we definitely don't want to do today. So, speaking of protecting your face, next thing you want to grab are your glasses. And these are a little small. I have a big head, but these are made for teenagers and younger. They're a little bit flexible. I have my own pair of glasses I pulled out of the lab. But you want your personal protective equipment, and you want to protect your eyes. And of course, the eyes, because of splash, you don't want any splash back and coming up and getting in your eye. If that were to happen, you'd have to go to the kitchen faucet and let it run and run and run for 5 to 10 minutes to make sure everything came out of your eye. So we want to make sure it's protected. Always keep them tight, snug in your face. Don't tilt them down low. Don't put them on your forehead because you're trying to look cool. Make sure that they're actually going over your eyes. I'm putting mine on right now. The next personal protective equipment you want is this thing that looks white, looks kind of like a trash bag at first, or a grocery bag. When you open it up, you'll see the straps. It's an apron. I'll click over, whoops, show you. There we are. So aprons for splash. If you ever gone out and eaten crab or lobster, they give you, or I guess if you eat a lot of chicken wings, they give you these. Just pop it loose. Make sure you don't tear it down here at the bottom. Just pop this loose end off. It has a small connector on it. And you have 2 sides, and then you'll just put it around you like you're in the kitchen with a bib, wearing a bib, just like that. And I have my lab coat on, so I don't need this because I wash my lab coat. But you don't want fishy smell getting on your regular clothes. Got my logo. And those are our pieces of PPE. Make sure you're wearing gloves all the time. If something happens to your glove and you accidentally rip the glove, you can always put like a grocery bag, a plastic grocery bag over your hand and still move things. You're just not going to get the sensations you normally would. You can put a Ziploc bag over so you can see where your fingers are and you can see what you're touching if you want something clear to go on with that. But you always want to make sure your hands are protected. Not because you're going to get sick from anything in the fish touching your fingers, but you want to make sure it's protected because the fish stink a little bit. And the last time I practiced with this, I only had 1 set of gloves, so I gave them to my daughter, and I used my bare fingers, and they smelled like nasty fish for 2 days. It just did not go away. So when I was eating a hamburger, I could smell the fish when I brought it up. It didn't matter how much I washed it. I used some bleach on my fingers and everything, and the fish smell just didn't go away. All right, let's click back. You don't need to see me. All right, other things you'll need that we don't put into the kit, you're gonna need a nearby sink. So make sure you're doing this in a kitchen, or if you're in a garage, there's a bathroom or something close. And I had kind of mentioned it already, is if you splash something in your eye on accident, you wanna be able to rinse your eyes under the faucet. You actually just tilt your eyes down like this, under the faucet, and let it run over. And I know it's hard to do sometimes, but you wanna blink and keep your eyes open as much as possible. Another thing is that if you spill something, you can get to the sink and wash it down. Everything that's inside the shark juices are actually safe to wash down the drain. The big bulky shark at the very end, we're gonna put in a protective bag, and everything we could possibly get in the bag, we're gonna keep in the bag. Right? Sharps and specific disposal. The sharps are going to be these tools. So you'll have a pair of scissors. You may have a pointy set. You may have a rounded tip set. And you may think you're not as cool if you got the rounded tip set, but if you notice, mine are the rounded tips. I like the rounded tips because it keeps me from accidentally stabbing things I don't want to stab. So if I'm going into the shark and I'm going through the skin and I don't, whoops, I already stabbed my book, and I don't want to puncture the stomach or an organ, these round tips let the organ move so I don't damage it. And they're really great because when we cut into the skin, you'll make a little puncture using this tool, and you should have a thing that looks kind of like a toothpick, but a thick toothpick. This will let us puncture into the skin, make a little hole. You'll open your scissors and just put that in underneath it, and you can pull up on the skin and just cut the skin. So that way when you open up the shark like a book, you can see all of the organs perfectly and they're not damaged. So this is, we're going to refer to this as the probe. Here are your scissors. The next sharps are your pens. And you have two different sizes of stick pens. Some of the kits have 3 of the short and 3 of the long. It doesn't matter, they're just randomly assorted. But these, when you need one to hold something in place, you just pull it out. You can push the tissue of the shark down, push it in, and it holds the shark in place. That way you can go on to another area. So when we open up the skin, when you open it wide enough, you'll actually be able to stick those pins in, and you can frees up your hands to move other things. Those are the stick pins. When you're not using them, never leave them laying around because you might poke yourself. I always stick them into something. So right now they're covered on the tip with that tape, but after you use them, always stick them into the foam so the tip's protected. Right. Safe disposal. You have 1 or 2 garbage bags to clear things. So at the very end of this, I'm sure you're not going to keep this in your bedroom or in your sock drawer or something. So at the very end, we'll take the bags, we'll put everything in the bag, and it's easy to dispose of. You can either have it brought to Jump and we'll dispose of it in our biohazard bin, which just burns it, or you can throw it away in regular garbage because everything is environmentally safe anyway. A lot of times when people dissect, they think of this chemical called formaldehyde or formalin. You've probably heard of it. If you're in your house right now and you look around, everything you can see has some kind of formalin in it. If it was a cloth, or if it was painted, or if it's a protective covering, because formalin prevents fungus and bacteria and viruses from growing inside of things. And that's why if you've ever been out in the woods and you have a bunch of mold spores or fungus or filthy shoes, and you get your carpet dirty, but you don't actually have anything growing. No fungus grows in your carpet because your carpet's actually full of formaldehyde and formalin-like chemicals. Same with your couch, your cushion, your sheets, all of those things. That's why they don't mold very easily. Otherwise, anytime you get something from the woods on like cloth or a cloth-like material and get it a little wet, mold starts growing. So these are safe to dispose of, just as safe as getting rid of your couch or getting rid of the paint in your walls if you have a newer house. All right, and then always have an adult within sight and sound so that if something does go wrong, you have someone watching over to protect you. So if you snip your fingertip with the scissors, which hopefully you won't because they're not that sharp, you have an adult nearby to help you wash it off, make sure that you're getting it bandaged properly. Or if you do feel like you have a little bit of an upset stomach or something, you can talk to the adult and they'll make sure you're okay. All right. Hopefully there are no questions, but if there are, just type them over in the chat box over to the side. Nobody? Great. If you do have any questions, remember the chat box is there for you. Okay, next, the kit materials. We kind of already walked through this. Make sure you have your dissection manual, which is this book. You'll have a baby dogfish shark. So these aren't exactly babies. So these dogfish are probably at least a year or 2 old. So what's interesting about the dogfish is that like when we're in our mom's tummy, we're actually in there for about 9 months through development, and then we get released. The dogfish is interesting because it can be in the mom's belly for up to 2 years, which is kind of crazy. So it takes them a long time to develop, even be about 4 to 6 inches long. So you have a ruler in there. If you imagine it, when they're born, they're somewhere between that 6-inch and 1-inch length. So this is a pretty well-developed shark. Another interesting thing about the sharks is that not like us, where when you hit your teenage years, at the end of the teenage years, you're as big as you're ever going to get height-wise. Sharks keep growing their entire life. So even when they hit their teenage, quote-unquote, years, they'll keep growing and growing and growing. They never stop growing. They slow down a little bit, but they keep getting bigger. Okay. And then the dogfish shark, again, kit. Your PPE we already talked about. Dissection tray, the metal tray, you should have it. You have a foam pad that goes in it, so it's not very slippery. And once you get a couple drops underneath this, it'll actually stick to the pan a little bit better. Dissection tools that we just talked about. The tweezers we did not talk about. They're not very sharp at the tip, but they do have grips, so you can grab hold of things and peel when you need to. And then your disposal bag. So everyone should have everything. If you don't have something, go ahead and type it in the chat box and let me know, and I'll see if I can come up with an alternative off the top of my head that you might have in your house. Nope, all good? Great, let's get going. Oh, and you also have a pen so that you can take notes or write anything down that you need to. If you have any questions and it might not be the right time, you can always write it down in your notepad or notebook, anywhere you want. So this is kind of an autopsy, except with an autopsy, you're working on you. When I say you, I don't mean you're cutting yourself open, I mean humans. So an autopsy, auto means self, and the topsy is to cut apart something. So we're cutting something apart and we're cutting ourselves apart, but today we're cutting a shark apart, so it's not technically an autopsy, it's called a necropsy. So even though humans are animals, anytime that you cut apart another animal to inspect it or look inside, it's called a necropsy. So who do you think would typically do autopsies? An animal, a general animal, or a person? Person, right? So what kind of doctor would typically do a necropsy? I feel like this is a trivia contest and we've come to the first question. You can throw it over into the chat side, see who's the first one to type it out. I didn't bring my glasses today. Not quite. So a coroner, who do you think the animal coroner would be? Special name for a doctor. That's exactly it. Yep. So veterinarians do necropsies. And it's important to do necropsies even when you don't think it is. I mean, animals die all the time, our pets die. But a lot of times when city workers will find animals on the side of the road that are dead, like lots of similar animals that didn't have like a clear car hit, they'll take them into a veterinarian and have them necropsy to find out why they died, because they may have a disease and it may be traveling in that community. All right, so autopsies, necropsies, we kind of answered that. Dog, fish, shark, some of the interesting information about it. So it is a fish, and it falls into a huge category of fish. There are over 30,000 different types of fish. This group of fish, sharks, actually there are about 1,000 of those. And what makes them really unique is that their bones aren't actually solid bones like most other animals. So when you think of a dog, cat, you, me, most fish, we have bones that are hard or brittle. You could break them, and when you cook them, you know, you could bend them hard enough to snap. Shark doesn't have that. A shark doesn't have any bones in their body. All of their skeleton is actually made out of cartilage. So if you're thinking about cartilage, and since your hands are clean, if you tug on your ear, that's cartilage. I know when I was a kid, the only thing I loved about going to the doctor was that I got little sun-kissed shoes and they were squishy like my ear, so it's the same idea. Another piece of cartilage would be at the tip of your nose. Up here on the top, the bridge is actually hard and you can tap on it, that's bone. Here's cartilage. So the shark's entire skeleton feels like that. And if you feel your shark, kind of bend it, there's nothing really hard. Anywhere that I touch it that feels hard, as I bend it, it actually feels a little softer. Maybe the skull, but technically a shark doesn't have a skull, it has a chondrocranium. So that's kind of one of the next things I was going to lead into, is that names, terminology. When you're doing dissections or when you're labeling things on an animal, they usually use fancy like Latin or Greek names, like chondra. Anytime you hear chondra, it's referring to cartilage. So if you have a chondrocranium, it means cartilage, and then what part of your body is your cranium? Mine sounds hollow. I don't know if you could hear that. Not much up in there. But it's saying that they have a cartilage skull. So their technical term isn't skull, it's a chondrocranium. When you look at the different sharks, some interesting things about sharks are that they're ectothermic. They take the temperature from the outside environment and use it in their body. They don't actually generate their own heat. Usually, so there is an exception, a couple exceptions to the rule. There's a handful of sharks, including your shark, that's endothermic. And endothermic means that they generate their heat. Endo means within, thermic means temperature. They generate their heat within. You are endothermic. So what does your body do when you're cold? Think about it a second. Exactly. I like that this is like charades. A lot of times you have to make the motion. So when you're cold, your body actually twitches its muscles to warm up, just like you're doing, right? When you're moving your hand back and forth, you can feel it getting hot. Your muscles twitch, little micro twitches that heat up your blood. Some sharks, like this one, like the dogfish shark, actually have a group of muscles that go down their core, and we'll look at those muscles. They're special muscles that twitch, and they can crank up their temperature about 5 to 10 degrees higher than the water around them. That makes it nice because they can stay in cooler water. They don't have to migrate so far. The bad thing is that they can go places you may not want a shark to go. Like sharks migrate, and some of them can travel in fresh water. We always think of like ocean salt water where sharks hang out, but some, like a bull shark, which is actually one of the more dangerous sharks, can swim freshwater. In fact, they like to have babies in fresh water. So when they're ready to lay their eggs, they move upstream into rivers and creeks, and bull sharks have actually been found in the Illinois River. So there's a fun fact for you. They go straight up from the Gulf of Mexico through the Mississippi River, and they've been found down at the intersection, the basin of the Illinois River. So I didn't find anything about Peoria having bull sharks, but you never know. Depends how eager they get to come up here. Some of the other things, they spend their entire life in the water, but they still have to breathe. So we'll start comparing some of the systems, like the respiratory system. You probably know what organ in your body helps you control breathing or exchange oxygen with the environment. And that would be the lungs. So we're going to see if we can find some lungs in a shark. And if not, we're going to figure out how they breathe. The digestive processes, we'll look at the digestive tract going from the mouth all the way down to the bottom in a shark. And we'll compare other systems. We might talk about the reproductive system a little bit. We'll talk about the nervous system and their sensations. If we have time, we'll actually cut the chondrocranium open and look at the skull and the inside. We'll cut down and follow the eye, open up the eyeball, and look at the structures on the inside of the eyeball. So if you flip your page, the next page, page 7, says think about it. I'm just for time's sake, I'm going to kind of like move right past this, but in your head, as we start going into each of the systems, think about it. Think about if we breathe air, how's a shark breathe it? Kind of make a mental note. Have your scientific mind on. All right, so the next thing we want to do is page 8. And page 8 is kind of an important one, and this is right before we open up the shark. So we want to know the terminology, because when I say you're moving in a certain direction, I'm not always going to say up, down, left, right. I'll use the technical terms, which is really important because when we look at structures on the inside, a lot of times they use these technical terms. So over here, external examination. When we're looking at a shark, just like us, we're going to have terms for what we mean by going towards the front of the shark. So when we go to the front, it's called cranial. Why would they call the front up here by the head the cranial region? Because your head is your cranium, right? I beat you to the typing. I can see what you guys are doing. So up here, the cranial region means it's going towards this. So if we refer to something as cranial, we mean it's up towards this direction. So we can talk about something way down here at the end of the shark, down in its tail, but we can use the term cranial because it means that that thing is going towards the head. Just the opposite is caudal. So caudal refers to tail. You might have to change something in your book. I noticed right here, it says anterior and posterior. On humans, that's actually anterior means the front, posterior means the back. So up here towards the front of the fish would be caudal. Sometimes you hear the word cephalic. It also means head, but typically in fish they say caudal. Or there's one fancy word called rostral when you hear it talking about specifically in the head. So like the nose is called the rostrum. Sometimes when you hear people talk about horses, I've heard rostral term used instead of cranial. And then of course down towards the tail is caudal. So over here, where it says posterior, you want to put caudal. Some people, like especially med students, they complain about how many new words there are and how hard it is. But I'm telling you, if you learn the basic words, a lot of this is easy. Like for instance, this fin on the back. If it's the most caudal structure, we call it the what fin? The caudal fin. Yep. So if we think of areas of the body, if this were you, picture these two fins as your arms, flippers. These two fins back here like your legs. Up here, what do you call this region on your body, in your chest, that's between your arms? Anyone know? Bodybuilders or people that are trying to get really strong, they build these muscles on the front of their chests. They call them there, and it starts with a P. I see eager typers. Well, it's not coming through. So this area up, oops, you can't see me. Flip over. So this area up here on me, this would be my pecs. So if we're looking at the fish, the shark, right here are the two arms, right in between would be the pectoral region. So we call these the pectoral fins, because they're in the pectoral region. Oops, somebody got bumped out. I'll let them back in. Perfect. So directions again, now I'll just hold the fish. Up here is cranial, down here towards the tail is caudal. Over to the side, so if I talk about this fin being on the side, it's lateral. If I say something is in the middle, I use the word medial. Here are a couple fancy words, and this is a really famous part of a fish, but the back of a fish, or the top part of the fish, this whole part up here is called dorsal. So you have two fins, and you can't really see them yet because we haven't taken the fish out of the bag, but there's a fin here and a fin up here. So what do you think we call these two fins? We call them the dorsal fins. And that's probably one of the most famous things about a shark, other than its mouth and teeth, is the dorsal fin, because that's what comes up out of the water as the sharks swing around. So dorsal. This one's tricky. The front side is called ventral. So humans are a little bit unique because we call our front side the anterior side, but I always think this is called the ventral side on animals because this is the side we ventilate or breathe through. So it's the ventral side. Dorsal, back here, we call this our posterior, but on a fish or dogs and cats, we call it the dorsal side. So those are just some terms that you really want to get familiar with, and there's a chance for you to write down in the bottom of your book, plugging those terms in. So if you wanted to write dorsal across the top fin, you could always write what the nose area is called. Rostrum was the technical term for the nose area, but what direction that is, that would be cranial. All the way back down, so I can flip screens. All the way back down here, if this is cranial, that's caudal. What's kind of cooler, there are so many sharks that the caudal, back here at the very end, caudal fin, that some of this can be really long and they can use it as a whip. Some of them can be very short. Some of them are abnormally shaped, and they all have purposes. Here you have the pectoral fin, and the fins on this one, on the sides, are lateral. You can't really draw this, but right down the middle will be medial. You can see it on this picture here. So lateral means to the side, medial means right down the middle. And then those are some of the really important terms that I'll keep using over and over. So even on a human body, we label a lot of our muscles, depending on the direction. So if I have a muscle that's towards the side of my body, what term would I use? I'll narrow it down. Would they use medial or lateral? If it's on the side, use lateral. If it's something closer to the midline of the body, we use medial. All right, so here's the exciting moment. Now we're going to use our hands. To open the shark bag, and don't open it yet, I'm going to explain how to. This is where you want to have that sink nearby. You're going to need your scissors. And when you open it, some bags, they're made to be shrink wrapped so that they're actually really tight all the way along around the fish. So you might see a little bit of fluid in there that leaked through the fish. When you cut this, don't cut it yet. You're going to cut this as close as you can to the fish, like this. So you put it over the sink, you make the cut, and then once you break the seal, you'll start seeing some bubbles. I don't know if you can see that. You'll cut really close to the fish. And when you're ready, so it's over the sink, make sure you have your pad. I'm sorry, I didn't mention that. When you go to the sink and you pull this out, you grab its nose, keep the bag standing upright so you don't spill everything, and go ahead and pull the fish out and put it down on your dissecting tray. And now your bag, if you keep it upright, you can leave it right in the sink. So you can just kind of fold it a little bit and put it right in the sink so you can use it later. We'll use this as part of the disposal. So I'll give you a few minutes and I'll watch for you to come back because I can see you. So when you come back, you'll have a fish on top of your dissecting tray. Somebody opened up. I see you waving. Somebody opened up her fish a little early. That's you, pointing at you. You're the only one I'm looking at. Oh yeah. Perfect. I'm gonna have to clean that mouse pad. Gross. Maybe burn it. Did you get it backside? Yeah, I should have picked something other than gray for the photos. My shark does that too. Well, hello, Mr. Shark. Hello. Hello. Oh man, if that's all over the iPad or the computer, you're gonna have to wash that later. Can you hold your fish so I can see the bottom side of it like this? The other day I thought that they were all gonna be boys. It's like these two are girls. Are you asking a question? Yes, question? What's your question? You'll have to type it. Just unmute all for now. And that would be.
It's gonna be so gross.
Hey, did you have a question?
Look at his little fin.
Must have accidentally muted herself.
Can you screen for me?
I am stressing. You said I could.
I'm unmuted. Who are we missing? I'm missing one. So I'm seeing the word eat in the background. And it's funny because when you order sharks, it's a big, bold asterisk that said, these are not to be eaten, because people do eat sharks. In fact, on some sharks, the dorsal fin and the pectoral fins, they cut off. So in the Chinese culture, that they're a delicacy. They consider it like caviar. So unfortunately, one of the bad things they do is that they'll catch the fish, just cut the fins off and throw the fish back. So it's kind of a problem. But they take the fins, they put it in stew, and then they have big parties. And if you have a shark fin stew that you're serving your party, it means that you're wealthy and powerful. And what they find is that the fins actually don't add any flavor to the soup at all. It's just a status thing. We've got one person still missing. So hopefully they didn't spill the shark juice all over their parents' carpet. Let's see. Oh, there's a question. Why does the fin look hairy? Back here. Let me see if I can click on. Strange, I can't make that image bigger. Oh, there we go. Genevieve, which fin were you asking about? On the top? You mean right back here on the back edge? No. Oh, this one? So it's not really hairy, that's just the very tip of it where all the scales start ending. So when we look at the scales, they're actually little tiny teeth. So if you look really close, they're jagged just like that. And that's the end of the scales. Did Jordan's computer freeze? Maybe. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to assume that they can see, and we're just going to move on. So, speaking of the scales, if you feel the fish, feel it in this direction. So there's one of your sensations. It's not like the skin on your arm that's soft and squishy. It feels a little bit squishy, but it's definitely not really soft. It's a little slick. Can you hear it drag a little bit? So on your skin, you have cells that will actually bump up against each other, and they form kind of like a scale pattern, but they're soft cells. On sharks, they actually have little tiny structures of scales that are like little tiny, well, teeth. They're actually structured just like a tooth. So when you go to the dentist and you have the outer part of your tooth clean, the enamel, the shiny part, the outside of these are an enamel. They're different colored, but they're still enamel. Underneath that, you have something called dentin that is telling you it's tooth material. And then you have a hollow cavity. Every one of these little scales are just like a tooth with those same three structures. So it's really interesting. And you kind of see it in the book, the overlapping of the scales. So a shark's skin is kind of like an armor. So if you're thinking of a knight and all their chain link armor, it's the same idea. So why would that be important? They have a chain link like armor going over their whole body. What benefit would that be? Sharks are like warriors, right? So if they get into a battle with something else, that actually protects them a little bit. If you feel backwards, going from the tail, oh, that gave me goosebumps. So if we're going from caudal to cranial or caudal to rostral, you can feel the scales catching. The little tiny edges of the teeth, and like you were pointing out earlier, you can see the little tips where they end kind of like shingles on a house where you see the edge of the shingles. But these are little pointy shingles. If you look at the color of the shark, on the top, it's more of a grayish brown, which is kind of a trademark for the sharks. If you flip it over, it's more pale, almost white. And this is not on accident, it's actually on purpose. So if you think of where the sharks are, where are sharks living? When you see a shark coming up to the surface of the water, it's usually coming up, they're scanning for food or checking things out. Sharks live way down in the deep. So if you imagine the dark surface with very little light on the bottom of the ocean, if you're standing over it, if you're a hunter, like a person that's hunting sharks, you're standing over it, it's actually camouflage. So the shark's moving along and hiding. Some sharks that lay on the bottom actually have camouflage patterns that help them blend in with their environment. So the dogfish shark actually likes to hang out towards the bottom, closer to the bottom. So when you look from above, it's dark down deep and it blends in with the darkness. If you're what it's looking for, so if you're the prey, the food, and you're swimming around underneath the shark, this is what you see. You see the light part, which may seem weird, but if you think of it from the shark's perspective, if you're underneath the shark looking up, you're looking at the surface of the water. What's the surface of water look like when you go swimming? Is the surface dark or is it really bright? It's really bright, right? It's bright because the sun's coming from down there. So when you're under the shark and looking up, it blends in with the sunlight coming down. So it's a great hunter because its prey is seeing the light and it's getting blinded kind of by the sun or blended by the sun. But if you're hunting a shark and you're looking down on it, it blends in with the camouflage to the bottom of the ocean. So that's pretty cool the way the shark's actually built on the outside. And that's the reason for the coloring. And of course, you know, things like the zebra shark has, well, actually has spots like a leopard, but it's called a zebra shark because when it's a small shark, it's striped like a zebra, so it can blend in with the coral that it hides in until it's bigger, and then it has big spots on it to blend in with the larger environment. But camouflage. All right. So if we flip to the next page, page 11, locomotion. So locomotion is talking about the movement of the shark, how it moves. If we're looking at the outside, still looking at external anatomy, what do you think is making the shark move? You want to say the fins, right? It's wrong. So the fins actually have other purposes. Fins really are there to steer, so driving forward. They're there to minimize spin. So that's what this dorsal fin on the top is. As it's going straight, it helps keep it in straight alignment. Steering, that's more for a job of the dorsal fins. The pectoral fins on the side, or these back here. What do you call, so we haven't named these yet, but what do you call your hip region? Anybody know? It starts with a P, from hip over to hip. So the bone in your hip on one side to the bone on the hip on the other side. An adult had to rush in real quick to type. That would be a parent that doesn't want shark guts on their computer. So we call this the pelvic region. So we call these the pelvic fins. Yeah. So we have the pectoral region, pectoral fins, pelvic region, pelvic fins. So these are for steering and moving. They're not for swimming. It's not like us where we use our arms and legs to paddle. What actually makes the fish move is typically the muscles in the body or down here in the tail. If it's a slim fish like this is actually a pretty slender fish, it has a really powerful tail to wiggle back and forth in S-like motion through the water. So it's all these muscles back here that are actually doing the propulsion. The fins are for steering and balance. We look at or feel that wiggle. That cartilaginous skeleton is nice because it lets it really bend a lot. So we go, hey, what's going on? It can do quick turns. So sharks aren't great at sudden stops. They're good at slowing down, but if they suddenly stop, what's interesting about a shark is that they're different from other fish, what we call the ray-finned fish, which is the majority of fish out there, 27,000 plus different kinds of fish. But if you think of a bluegill or a catfish or things like that, those fish have something called a swim bladder. So there's a big, like hollow tube of air that helps them float. Sharks don't have that. So if a shark stops swimming, what's it going to do? Sinks, right? So when a shark stops swimming, it will sink towards the bottom. But its fins, like the pectoral fins, are actually like airplane wings. So when it's coming through, it's actually steering that forward movement. With that bendy skeleton, they don't have to stop. So if their fish swims by, they can do a quick U-turn really fast and go back after it. Like a cop when your parent's speeding. They do that quick U-turn and zoom, they're after them. So those are some of the benefits to the fins, or purpose of the fins. And then with that movement, you have a lot of really strong muscles through the body. Bigger sharks that are fatter, they actually do more of the wiggle in their belly. So if you look at something like a whale shark, the biggest shark out there, it has a fat belly and it kind of like waddles through the water. It's just like this shark, it has all the same structures, but it waddles, where this one needs to be fast to catch its prey. So it has a fast tail, very strong and powerful. So some of the structures in page 11 in bold that you definitely want to make sure you're paying attention to. Where the head is, where the trunk is, where the tail region's at. You want to remember that the anterior part is the front, dorsal is the back. Looks like we got a typo in there. So it's anterior and ventral will be that bold word, and then posterior dorsal. Most fins are paired. So all fish have 7 fins. Here you have 2 pair, pectorals. You have 2 pair of the dorsals. Here's one up here, and there's one way back here at the back. What's interesting about the dogfish is they actually call it the spiny dogfish shark, because, and do this carefully, but if you feel the front of its dorsal, you feel kind of a hard, feels like a bone. It's a spike. So there's actually a needle-like spike. That's why they call it spiky. It comes off the back of each of these. If you've ever gone, if you caught catfish have kind of that bony spike coming off of them. It's the same idea. This has poison in it. So we cut it off. When I say poison, everybody gets afraid, but to humans, it just irritates. So if you got it under your skin and make you itch really bad, the spine itself sticking in your skin would hurt the muscle, and that would be what the painful part is. But this is, what benefit would it have for a shark? I mean, it's not in their mouth. They don't go forward and inject the poison. It's on their backside. So when you think about it, why would that be good for a shark? Well, if I were a bigger shark and I came along and I went to bite this one, what would happen? That needle spike would go right into my jaw and I'd want to let go of it. So one of the benefits is protection. So I read some piece of information that said they use it for hunting, but it's not really practical for hunting. It's mostly for protection. Right? So locating the spines was one of our steps. You found one here and you found one here. They should be removed, all of them. They have to be removed. I don't know why I said should, but you can still feel where they were at one time. Some of the other structures to look at, we flip the page to page 13. Whoops, I have to move that page in order. This is showing the skeleton. So if you look at the dogfish skeleton, you can see a lot like us, that pectoral region right here, with what would be the equivalent of 2 arms poking off. You've got the pelvic region, just like we have, with the 2 leg-like structures poking off. We use these for swimming, but remember, these aren't really that long. They're not like our long arms and legs that we can propel way out in space. They can just wiggle these structures. So they're more for just guiding, steering. And then a unique structure, when you look at it, here's the vertebra, just like we have a vertebra going all the way down our spine. It has a spinal cord going with it. But down between the legs and going off the back, it has the long tail. And that's actually where the propulsion is coming from. If you look up here at the top, at the skeleton, remember this is all cartilage, so it's really hard to find a picture even or to dissect down like this because this is all really soft and squishy, just like the muscle around it. You can see there's the skull, chondrocranium. There you can see where the neck would be. What's interesting about a shark, and we'll see this, is that when you cut open the chest region here, you'd expect to see a heart. The heart's actually shifted up a little bit more, closer to the neck. And then the vertebra coming all the way down. So what do you think these little lines are coming off the side? Well, if you compare and look over here, just like us, they have ribs. They have ribs that give structure, helps give that roundness and shape. One page too far. So let's go to the nervous system while we're looking at the outside. Page 15, down here, page 15. It says shark's nervous system is a lot like ours. It has a brain. It has a central nervous system. That would be the brain and the spinal cord that sends signals out to everything to control movement and also receive information back up to let it understand its environment to move. It also has senses just like us. Anyone know how many senses we have? And if you think about them, where are most of your senses? What part of your body are most of your senses? In the head, right? So you have sight, sound, taste, smell. Those are all in the head. What's the last one? Touch, right? And that's everywhere on your body, on your back, so you can feel when someone taps you on the back, on your fingers, your toes, everywhere. Sharks have all those same sensations, but they actually have 2 unique extra ones. So they have 7 sensations. When you look at sight, of course, they have vision. And we'll look at this closer, but when you look at the eyeball, sharks are interesting because they're the only fish with an eyelid. So some fish, or some sharks, actually have a clear eyelid. You may be able to grab this. But a lot of the sharks actually have, oops, hopefully I can grab it. See that eyelid? An eyelid that comes from the bottom, not a top one, just a bottom one. And usually the only time they blink, they don't blink just like we do randomly to wash off their eyes because their eyes are constantly being washed. But they usually only close their eyelid when they're about to attack. So when something gets really close, like they're about to bite it, they'll close their eyelid to protect their eye and then they attack it. So while they're actually doing the attack, they're blind. They have other sensations to let them know what's going on around their head besides vision. And a little bit later, we'll actually follow the path from the brain to the eye, and we'll remove the eye and look at the structures on the inside. So there's sight. If you think about where the shark's at, it's really a dark environment. So sight's good only really close up. So within 20 meters, roughly. So 60 to 90 feet in that range. So it has to be close. Right. The next one in the notebook, or sorry, we skipped over it, is smell. If you looked at the shark and you're looking for holes, a lot of people think, well, that's where they smell, right there. That's not right. It's actually called a spiracle, and we'll talk about it in a minute. That's not for smell. Look up at the front. There's its nose. So if you look at the rostrum, the tip, the front here, the nose region, just like you, it has a pointy nose. It has a nostril here, or a nair, and a nostril here, or they're commonly called them nairs. So we have nairs also. We refer to them as nostrils at the front. So what's really unique about the shark compared to us is that when a shark breathes through these nairs, it smells just like we do. Its smell system, we call it the olfactory system, is just like ours, except it's a lot more complex. A shark can actually smell 1 drop of blood. And if you had an Olympic swimming pool, if you put a tablespoon of blood in one end, the shark could smell it at the other end right away. So it would chase after it. So its sense of smell is a lot better. It'd be more like a bloodhound or a dog that chases animals based on smell. Bloodhound doesn't see a rabbit. It knows where a rabbit was because the rabbit left smell on all the plants. So a shark's the same way. It can smell the path from where an animal was, very little smell, until it's thicker and thicker until it's right up on the animal where the deepest smell is or the strongest smell is. So that's one thing that makes it different from us. Another is that our nose is actually connected to our mouth. So if you followed your nose, or you've done this before, you're drinking soda and you laugh, the soda goes out from your mouth, up and into your nose and out, and it burns like crazy. Shark doesn't do that, not because it doesn't drink soda, but because its nose is not connected to its mouth. So the water flows into the nose and actually flows right back out. It just kind of does a little loop. It's constantly flushing through both sides. So if it smells something, it brings the smell in, flushes it out. If it's stronger on this side than this side, it knows to turn that way, and it follows and keeps going. So we'll look at that pathway too. And the structure on the inside, on the chondrocranium, cranium, is a little bit bigger than our inner nose structure. That's smell. Super, super strong smell. Next one's touch. So sharks can feel touch just the way that we do. Most of their touch is really interesting though. So they have touch sensors all over their body like we do. They know when something bumps their fins. They know when something taps its back. They know all of those things. But the most sensitive parts of its body for touch are actually around the mouth and in the teeth themselves. So every one of these teeth have nerve endings. when you get a cavity and you feel that pain, it's the same idea. It's because a nerve is going into your brain telling you when you're sensing something. So shark can have over 3,000 teeth at one time. That's a lot of teeth. That's a lot of dental bill too. Just kidding. When a shark loses a tooth, it never has a chance to get a cavity because they lose them. Every day they're losing teeth. And back teeth just move forward into the position. So as a tooth falls out, boom, it falls out, just pops a new one in its place. And we'll look at those too. They have several rows of teeth we're going to look at. So that feeling is mostly around the mouth. And that can be a problem because when a shark wants to know something more about something, like a baby, what's a baby do when it wants to learn about something? When a young baby, it takes a ball, and what's the first thing it does with the ball? Sticks it to its mouth, right? So we have a lot of nerve endings around our mouth too. Our lips and our tongue are full of them. A shark's the same way. If it wants to put its mouth around a ball, what's going to happen to that ball? Bad news for the ball, right? So if it gets close to another fish or it gets close to a person and it's curious, what's it going to do? You might nibble, take a bite. Well, that nibble is pretty dangerous. So what's interesting is that when we hear about shark attacks and we think how dangerous and bad sharks are because they kill lots of people, not many people actually die from shark attacks. A lot of times sharks will take that bite because they're curious, thinking we're something like a turtle. So if you're on a surfboard and your legs are sticking off, kind of looks like a turtle, the legs poking back. And a shark doesn't like the way we taste typically, so they take a little nibble and then get rid of us. So you hear about a lot of when a shark attacks, like they'll bite a leg or bite an arm or bite part of the person, but the person lives. You're more likely to actually get struck by lightning and killed than you are to get bit by a shark attack and killed. You're more likely to get killed by deer, actually, than a shark too. So that's the mouth. Like I said, with touch, most of its touch sensations around the mouth. It does have an extra touch or pressure sensor that goes around the side. So if we flip this around and look, you can kind of see that pathway. There's a little bit of a stripe going down the side. This is a sensation that's different from us. This is a pressure pathway. And this pressure pathway is called electroreception or an electrosensory. So, sorry, I said the wrong one. Pressure is just pressure. Electrosensory is up here. Wow, that was my first major mistake. I'll have to get good at that. Sorry. So these pressure receptors are actually little tiny holes that go all the way along the side. We call it the lateral line. So this is kind of interesting. Have you ever been in a pool and you're kind of splashing water around? You can feel the waves and you can feel the pressure and you know where the waves are coming from? It's the same idea. When we feel the pressure on our skin as touch, sharks actually have little tiny holes that feel changes in water pressure. So if a fish swims near it, that fish creates a current. The shark knows something moved near here, and so it can do one of those U-turns and come right back around. So this whole line, actually starting way up here in the face, going all the way down, it's called the lateral line. Lateral because it's on the side, line because it's in a line, but it's for pressure. There's one on the other side too, all the way along. And then I kind of jumped and skipped straight to the electroreception. So let's go to the electroreception. All the way across the front of its nose, this pointy area, it has a bunch of little tiny pores too, but those aren't holes, they're hollow holes. These are actually jelly filled. So if you've ever done experiments with electricity or you've seen someone get hooked up to like a monitor, like a heart monitor or a brain monitor, they take those little pieces of probe, they put some jelly on the tip of it and they stick it onto the person. Each of these little holes is filled with that jelly that detects the electrical change. So this is kind of weird, but it's interesting if you get a chance to YouTube it. You can actually not paralyze, but make a shark stop and feel comfortable with you if you tickle its nose. Sounds dumb, but the videos are just crazy. Have you ever had, I don't know if any of you have cats, cats or dogs, but if you itch its chin, like tickle its chin, it loves it. It just eats it up and it rubs all over your fingers. Sharks are the same way. So you can Google videos. Trying to remember, I think it's called, not Blue Planet, but somebody's Blue World. I'll have to look it up and remember it. But somebody's Blue World, and if you click Blue World and sharks, you'll probably find it. But he shows videos where he's underwater and they're tickling the shark. The shark will swim by and they start rubbing the bottom of the shark's chin, and the shark just pauses, stops. And they can just keep tickling and tickling and tickling. The shark just sits there enjoying it. So it's kind of interesting. It's like a pet. And then when they're tired of it, they just swim away and they're gone. But they can tickle the jaw up here at this electrical sensitivity area. And they think, because the gloves that they wear actually have like a chain link of metal, they think that it might be stimulating an electrical impulse there that makes the shark happy. But they can take the shark while they're tickling it and point it straight up and down. They can point it like this. They can move the shark wherever they want, and the shark just, it's paused. Almost like if you hold a cat by the scruff, how it just freezes, the shark does the same thing. And they call it tonic immobility. So that's another thing you might be able to Google, is tonic immobility. So that's electric sensation. What's another cool thing about this electric sensitivity is it's super sensitive. This shark, all those little areas, can actually detect muscle movements from a fish close by. So when your muscles move, they send off an electrical impulse. That's how we can stick monitors on your heart and know what's happening with your heart, is because your heart sends electrical impulses. But a shark has those sensors built into the front part of its nose, so it knows when muscles are twitching near it. So if it attacks a fish and that fish is still twitching, it knows. When it stops twitching, it knows when it stops and when it's dead. Trying to think of other good examples. When you watch like Shark Week or the shark videos where they have the cameras, sharks know if they have a really bright light that's sending off electrical impulses, the sharks know that, not because of the light, because of the electrical activity. If you have bubbles coming from your mask, a lot of sharks don't like people and they avoid people. Those bubbles change enough pressure that the lateral line can actually sense it. So it's kind of cool that the shark doesn't need the typical sensations that we have to know when someone is present or when their prey is present. Right. So yeah, a heartbeat, it can detect the heartbeat, the muscle impulse from that, or the twitching from another animal. A shark can actually, like a bat, how a bat sends sound off to bounce off of walls and come back to it. A shark, when it moves, actually pushes water, bounces off walls near it, comes back and hits that lateral line, and it knows when it's really close to a wall, even if it's not looking at it. I think we got them all. Are you thinking of a sensation that maybe I forgot? Didn't mention taste. So taste, if you open up the shark's mouth, you can feel it. You stick your finger in. You can feel that tongue. It's not technically a tongue. It's actually a bulky piece of cartilage. So it's not muscular like yours. It doesn't move around the way that you have. It's more like a pad. So when something goes in, it can smash it against the roof of the mouth before it swallows it down. So the taste receptors are actually up on the roof of the mouth. So as it's smashing and pushing blood or muscle or whatever through the roof of the mouth, up here is where it's tasting. So if you want to point to something, you can always use your probe or tweezers. So all the way along here, on the top, taste buds. A little bit different than us. And then there's one more that's not actually in the manual. I can't hear you. What's the sensation that we're missing? Point to the organ. Nobody knows? Let me give you a bigger hint. I can't hear you. Hearing, right. So hearing is missing. Sharks, you see these holes on the side, the spiracles? Not the ear. We'll talk about those in a little bit. But a lot of people confuse that with either the nose or the ear, and it's not. It's actually not for either of those things. This is a way for sharks to breathe if they ever have to sit still. We'll talk about that. But if you scan along right in this area, you can kind of feel a little bit of a dip. Right above the gills, back to the spiracles, kind of a dip. There's actually a capsule in there. And I haven't been able to see it, but there's supposed to be a little teeny tiny hole. I just have not been able to find one on any shark. But there's a little tiny hole that allows water to go in, real super small. Underneath here is just like your ear. So you don't realize it, but your hearing actually works because of fluid movement. So sound comes into your ear, it goes down to a set of tubes that get vibrated that are full of fluid, and that stimulates hearing. Sharks don't need that structure on the outside of an ear like we do, because this wall can vibrate with sounds and it moves those tubes just the same way. So it's really interesting. Their hearing is just like ours. Their balance is just like ours. Inside of here, you have balance organs too, to let you know when you're turning your head left and right, up and down. If you're spinning, and this is like a whole different kind of course, but if you're sitting in a chair or you put your head on a baseball bat, I don't know if you've ever done this, put your baseball bat down, you spin and spin, and then you try and run straight. These little organs that are in your ears, that fluid's actually shaking in there and splashing around, and you don't know which way you're going. So that's why when you're trying to run, you curve back and forth because the fluid shakes and tells you you're going left. Wait, no, I'm going right. Sharks have the same fluids. So that's the bulk of our external anatomy, which means we're getting really close to cutting open. One last structure. So this is normally not a hole. Tuck that right back in. They cut that open so that they can, mine's actually injected with some colorings. Yours are not, sorry. But all the way down here at the end, you remember what these fins are called? These were the pectorals. This is the dorsal. These are the P-word pelvics. Yep, so here's the pelvic. So just like you, when you go to the bathroom, most of the structures are in your pelvic region. Same with the shark. So releasing babies, releasing tinkle, urine, going poo, all of it is one structure right here at the very bottom. It sits in between these two pelvic fins. So it's called a cloaca. And a cloaca, if you're on page 17 in the book, there are other animals that have cloacas too, not just a shark. But the cloaca is pretty common in birds. In fact, I think every bird has a cloaca. I'll have to look into that before I say it for sure. But it's the same way. So when a chicken lays an egg, it's reproducing and releasing through the cloaca. When it has to pee, it pees through the cloaca. When it has to poo, it poos through the cloaca. So maybe you've seen when birds poo or pee, splatter on your car, your parents' car, boop, that came out of the cloaca. That's the passageway. One last thing while we're right there. If you look at these two pelvic fins, you can tell if you have a boy or a girl based on these fins. So if you have a girl, they look like mine. This is female. You see the fins. If you have a boy, there'll be a tube that looks kind of like this probe that sits right here on both sides. So the tube will be longer and it pokes kind of like that. You'll see it hanging. The same thing over here. So those two structures are for reproduction in the male. Females don't have it. That's pretty much the tour of the outside of the shark. So now we need to start looking inside. Come up. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to look inside the gills. Count the number of gills. So here's a gill. Here's a gill. This line. Here's a gill. Here's a gill. And here's one. Anybody have more? That was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Anyone have more than 5 gills? You shouldn't. If you have more than 5 gills on one side, you need to recount. So all fish have at least 5 gills. Most fish actually have protective covering. So if you've gone fishing, you don't typically see the gills from the outside. You would have to pick up that protective covering to look inside of a normal fish's gills. Sharks don't have that. Sharks need air to flow through their mouth or through this thing called spiracle down and over the gills fast, real quick, so they can get oxygen out of the environment. So we're gonna open up in there. Let's look at respiration. So if you're on page 18, you can kind of see what's going on inside. We're gonna get down inside the gills. Remember, this shark doesn't have a swim bladder, that pocket of air, so it always has to be moving, which is good for the shark because water's always coming in, going over the gills and getting oxygen out. The bad news is if it stops, some sharks could die. So it would be like they just stopped breathing. Not all sharks, but some sharks. All right, so let's open this up. Page 19. Internal examination. So this is the first time you're going to use sharp objects to actually try and puncture something. So be careful. Remember, this is kind of sharp. This is kind of sharp. You don't want to stab through it into your hands. So wherever you put your hands, always make sure you can see your fingers and you're never pushing the sharp towards you. It's the same in the kitchen if you're using a knife. No matter what the knife is, you're never supposed to actually push it towards your hand or pull it towards you. Same with scissors. Never towards you. So we're going to follow down. We'll look in between the two fins. Here you have the pectoral fins. You can kind of feel there's a bony feeling structure in here. Right there. On you, it would be like your We call it the breastplate. It's called the sternum. Same idea. You're going to go right below that sternum, that bony landmark, and you're going to push gently until you feel a pop. So you're going to take the pointy part of the probe, either side pointy, I guess. And just, my probe's kind of dull on that side. Oh, there it goes. Felt the pop. So just so you feel the pop and pull it back out. If it's too hard to feel the pop, another thing you can do is you can pinch the tissue so that it wrinkles right there in the middle, and take your scissors and cut like I just did. But you don't want to go too far in. So as soon as you feel a pop, pull it back out. Now we have an opening. Now I can actually take the scissors. And what's kind of cool about dissecting, doesn't matter what animal it is that you're dissecting. I guess I never dissected a worm, but vertebrates. So if they have a spinal column, is that every organ inside the body is wrapped in its own protective covering. So the skin is a protective covering for the whole body, but everything we see inside here has its own covering. So once we get just under the skin, you can feel it, we can kind of wiggle and separate. So I can wiggle back and forth, and you can see my tip is separating tissue. See how I'm wiggling down, wiggling down, wiggling down, wiggling down. I just wiggle. I can see the scissors right underneath, and I just keep wiggling. Wiggle, 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 wiggle. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. And if you get down far enough and you slowly open the scissors, it spreads that protective covering. So I can open it and spread, and I can pull back. And now I actually have some sharp skin. So if I want to make some boots later, maybe a nice jacket. You see, I just cut underneath the skin. You can feel that skin. Shark skin can be different thicknesses. The thickest shark skin is the whale shark, the one I mentioned earlier, the big waddler, 4 inches thick. That's how thick its skin is. Now I'm under one side. Now I'm under the other side, and the same thing. I can wiggle, 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 kind of peel. Wiggle, 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 kind of peel. Pull back. Now I can see the muscle underneath. If I want to keep doing that, I can just put my finger underneath. If I pull my finger back, pull my finger back, pull my finger back, push it in, I can really smell the fish. Pull my finger back and separate all of that. And now I can cut some skin, just so I can see some muscles. There you go. You see kind of the pink color of the muscle in there. I can bring it back higher. So I have some muscle, skin. You can feel the oiliness of the skin. Why do you think it feels oily? Most animals that live in the water have an oily lining because water and oil don't like each other. If you mix up Italian dressing, you can see where the vinegar, which is watery, separates from the oil. They don't like each other. So by having a protective oil all the way through here, it actually helps waterproof the inside of the fish or any animal. And oil also keeps them warmer. Okay, so we've got the muscle. Now we're gonna go a little bit deeper. So I'm gonna put my scissors down. I wanna be careful because I can feel I'm rubbing around in there. So I'm just gonna go underneath the muscle. Since I know the skin's peeled back, the only other layer here is muscle. So I'm gonna go in a little bit, you feel it. I'm gonna open my scissors carefully and go under the muscle and pull up. So I just wanna go in far enough so I can get like hooked under the muscle. And now I'm pulling upwards and I'll cut a little bit, I'll cut a little bit, a little bit, a little bit, and I just keep sliding down. The benefit to having the round tip is that as I slide, I shouldn't be cutting any other organs. I'm only cutting this muscle and skin. And now I'm going into the skin and I can feel it getting a little bit tougher because of that armor. All the way down. Looks like I might have nicked a little something in there. Oh, no, I didn't. Nope, I didn't nick anything. It looks like they injected yellow. They did, yellow coloring. We're still good. Made me nervous. I can keep going down, go down to that round thing, and I'll feel it hit. I'm actually, right now, probably hitting the intestines, because the intestines will end right here at the cloaca. I'm open. Now my fish is cut all the way down the center. Now I want to cut, so here are my two pectoral fins. I'm going to cut right across the middle of those. Cut, cut. Snip, snip, snip. Snip, snip. Snip. Snip, snip. And it's open. So if you did a good job cutting underneath without puncturing anything else, you'll see here you have the inside of the smooth muscle. And you can see another sac. This sac is actually wrapped around the liver. It looks kind of like a sardine. I don't know if you've ever eaten a sardine and mustard, but if you haven't before, you're not going to want to now. I feel my finger going on both sides. I run my finger up and kind of feel up to that sternum area. I'm going to cut a little bit higher. Yep. So now I can feel the whole inside. And there you can see that sac again. So I don't know how clearly you can see this, but there's the clear sac. It goes around all the internal organs down here. So it's still stuck to the muscle, looks like. Now I'm open. Be a good place to stick a pin. So I can take a pin over here, and when you stick it, you're going to want to stick it at an angle. So the pin's always going towards the center of the body. I'm not actually poking the body, but I start way out here, and I poke it down into the pad like I'm going underneath the fish. That way, as I pull on it, it holds open. If you put it the other way, it'll pull the pin out. I'll do the same thing over here. To get a better grip, because my gloves are a little bit slimy, I'll grab my tweezers. Grab, I'll pull, and I'll go towards the fish again. Boom. Held open, like a book. And now, I'm going to go all the way to the bottom end, way down here, and do the same thing. I'm going to cut, cut, and you're going to see there's a lot more muscle down here, so it's a little bit tougher to cut because that tail is muscular. We're moving. Cut, cut, cut. And now I can take two more pins. Where do I put my pins? There they are. Same thing. I'll go at an angle. Boop. And I'll go at an angle going on here. So now we have a nice open book. So one of the things that makes us different while you're still doing that is that right up in here, our chest would have a set of lungs and a heart right up here. And where the lungs would be, we would call it the pleural cavity. Down here, we call it the peritoneal cavity that wraps in all of your like gut organs, your like intestines and stomach and everything. So we call that the peritoneal cavity. But on this, since they're all connected, we actually call it the peritoneal cavity on the fish. Cool. I think everybody's about ready. So now you can see these two things are like torpedoes on the side. You can see there's usually a little gap here that you can slide your fingers under. Just slide your fingers underneath them, like this, wiggle, separate that one, separate this one. That one's kind of being stubborn. This yellow goo kind of held it together. There we go. So we have one on this side, one a lot like it on this side. Then there's actually a little one up here in the middle, right here, you can see. But those three things are lobes of the liver. So your liver is really important because it helps you when you eat things you probably shouldn't have eaten that are dirty or have bacteria or viruses. It helps filter out anything that might get into your blood system. The liver filters that. If you ate toxins, like if you ate something that had metals in it, fine metals that got into your system, this would grab it. Like copper is actually in our diet, and we don't really pay much attention to it, but that copper will get filtered. So this is kind of like a filter. If you have a car, oil runs through it, this is the oil filter. It takes all of the impurities out of the oil. This helps take the impurities out of the blood, so those bad things don't go to the wrong places. If you had some kind of drug, like if you're taking an antibiotic or if you're taking a medication for something, the liver will actually take a bunch of that drug out of your system. So when we give a patient a drug, you have to take that into consideration that the liver is going to get rid of some of it. So that's the liver. We're going to separate and pull back. We're going to kind of follow the digestive tract. Oops, sorry, that's not the next thing in. We have circulatory is the next. So we can actually go up this way. Cut, cut, and we're going to take a little bit of a turn. So we're cut up here in between the gills. We can come from the mouth on one of the sides. I'm going to do this without bumping the camera. Go to a mouth, snip, put the scissor in the mouth, snip, and we're shooting for right down here in the middle. Snip, got it, and snip, we're in. You see the mouth, it's kind of opening. Sharks were one of the first fish to have jaws. Before sharks, a fish they were suckers, and they're still around like that. If you think of something like a leech is not a fish, but there are fish that look a lot like leeches. If you ever see images of a shark swimming and they have those things that look like a leech hanging off them, those are called lamprey. That's actually a fish that's a sucker fish. That has a mouth that sucks. Cutting a little bit. There we go. So now, again, I'm opening this up. I can pull open. Ta-da! So right underneath the base of the mouth, so here's that tongue-like structure. Go down. On mine, you can see some of the red coloring. Yours is mostly gray. Those are blood vessels. It's kind of tight here. I'm opening it up, but I can see something's holding it. The ligament. Ligaments, well, typically will hold bones to bones. In this case, it's holding cartilage to cartilage. I'm opening up, and now I can see the inside of the shark. I can see the roof of the mouth. Remember how we talked about the taste buds? You can see all the taste pores, structure, little bumps across the top of the tongue, top of the mouth. I can see this thing right here, and that's really what we're looking for up in the top part of the chest. That's the heart. Doesn't seem very big, right? So this heart It's a closed circuit system, which means that it has blood just like we have, and that blood has to leave the heart, go to all the parts of the body, circulate back around, and come back to the heart. It's a closed circuit. That means it doesn't leak anywhere else. Other things like insects, some other fish, I think frogs actually have it too, but they have an open circuit system, but they don't have blood. They have something called hemolymph, and it goes out, squishes around in their body, and eventually it finds its way back to the heart. What's nice about this closed circuit is that when you need something to go through your body fast, this is a very specific, it's like a sprayer on your garden hose. It's very specific in spraying, not just pouring water all over. So if I want something delivered like body temperature, I'll push the blood through the heart. I'll push it down to the parts of the body that are nice and warm. I'll pull it around to all the other parts of the body and pull back to the heart to start all over again. If I want oxygen, so what's interesting about this heart, if you look in the pictures, this is the circulatory system. It's a closed circuit. You can see the flow comes up, goes over, comes down, and comes right back up. This is a human on this side. So here's our heart. We have 4 chambers in our heart. So blood comes up into our heart that doesn't have oxygen. It gets pumped out to our lungs. It gets pulled back into the heart, and then it gets pumped again out to the rest of the body. The oxygen is pulled into the tissues like your muscles, and then that blood comes back to the heart to do it all over again. But when you look inside here, if you know in a human's body, where are the lungs? They're right next to your heart. If you look right next to the heart, there's nothing on either side. So sharks have lungs? Nope, no lungs. Instead, if you look, here's the heart. You see this little tube coming out of the top of the heart? That tube, it's kind of tricky. It shows it in red here, but that tube is full of blood that doesn't have oxygen. So if you kind of snip or follow it, yours isn't red, but it definitely sticks out. So if you put your probe under or your scissors underneath it without cutting it, you can see it sticking out. That's a major blood vessel called an aorta. We have one too. They call this the ventral aorta. It is on the front side. That aorta comes up, it goes over to the side. So in this example, I cut it, but this one comes up and it would go down into here. Cut these open too. We cut a little to the side, snip, 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 just cut some of that muscle over here carefully. Because what we're looking for right here. We pull that muscle back. You see those lines, the red lines? They're kind of pink. Those are where the gills are at. And they're pink because when they put this dye, this red dye in the shark, it followed the blood flow up and over. So you can see exactly where the blood's flowing. And it's blood flowing all through those gills. So if I pull down and I look, I can see my gills. Let's see if I can pull this. Oh yeah, I'm stuck to the board. See if I can open up a little bit. I'll pull this muscle back some, I'll wiggle it some, pull it back, wiggle it, pull it back, wiggle it. Now I'm opening up the gills. Yeah, so we can go backwards. We can go in from the outside, wiggle that through, and you can see on the inside. So here's one gill up here, and you can see it. Water flows following this toothpick probe. Comes into the mouth, goes down, it flows over all those blood vessels that are in the gill, and then it flows out through the mouth, down over the gill, and then out. So what's interesting about this is that that's water flowing, right? And we don't think of water having a bunch of air in it, but it does have oxygen. It has a lot of oxygen in it. Our bodies are just not good at getting the oxygen out. But when a shark forces this over, it's forcing it really close to the blood vessels. And what happens is the oxygen will jump into the blood vessel and then go through the shark's body through the blood. With us, we breathe the air in, we breathe it into our lungs, the little sacs we call alveoli. And those sacs hold it for just a little tiny second and it pulls the oxygen into our blood. So we actually have bags that we collect the air in, pull the oxygen out, and then put it through their body. Fish don't have that. fish have to push it quickly over. A lot of water constantly flowing over, and it's pulling all the oxygen it can out and putting it into the the gill. And then that blood flow is coming back towards the heart. Doesn't actually go into the heart, but it comes down through the rest of the body. Let me show you this. We're still in the mouth. So right now it's as if the shark just ate my finger. It's going down, going down. Give it one more snip. See if we can get it a little bit lower. Maybe 2 more snips. Can you see it? I don't know how well you can see the coloring. There's red through here. Yours are going to be gray. See it up here? And if I take my probe, you have kind of a sharp but flat side on the probe. You can scrape along. And you can see that Y-shaped. And that's following the blood flow. So I just clean a little of the surface skin off so I can see it a little bit better. I wish I could zoom with this and show you a little bit more detail, but I can't. So the blood will come up out of the heart. It'll go into the gills, pick up oxygen, bring it back down, and then part of the path will come up here to circulate towards the brain and the eyes and the nose. Another path will come down here. And if we move the internal organs over to the side a little bit, you can see it coming right down the middle on the back. See it? It's like a tube. And here's that clear wrapper. If I follow the clear wrapper down, I follow right to that blood vessel. Yours are dark, remember, they're like a gray, but you can see this pink. So the blood, after it's picked up blood or oxygen from the gills, it comes down, straight down the center, right by the vertebra, and then part of it will come out here and go to the intestines. There are actually lots of branches coming off in here deep, going to each of the organs. So there's a branch that'll come over to the liver at the top. There's a branch that'll go to the stomach, comes all the way down here. This branch comes to this spirally looking thing. It was kind of like a worm or a snake. It's a small intestine. So this is the branch that goes to the intestine to keep it alive. Everything in the body needs blood. You can see it looks almost kind of like it disappears on mine, but it didn't. It's just a little bit deeper, comes down lower, and then it comes over here. This thing's interesting. So this structure is for cleaning up salt water. Just like us, the shark's body is not a huge fan of salt water. So it has a special structure here that cleans the salt, filters it, and then pushes it back out in the water so that its blood doesn't get too salty. So that's kind of the blood pass you can see. One other unique thing is that the spiracle, the tube on top that we talked about, remember how flexible our shark is? Here's a spiracle. If I wiggle a little bit, wiggle, 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 you can see it came right through. That spherical, so like it had an H. It comes from the top of the shark, not through the eyeball. It's that thing above the eyeball. As it goes in, this is for breathing. So sharks that can stop and don't die have to have a spiracle. What they do is they take their cheeks and they puff their cheeks like a chipmunk, and they suck water in through the spiracle, and then they smash their cheeks and push it out through the gills. So they'll suck water in and then smash it and push it out through the gills. If you watch a video with a shark breathing, it breathes really fast, like it's panting, because it's constantly having to push that water through and get oxygen. And we haven't seen this yet, but if you look at how close the spiracle is to the eye will get oxygenated blood from the gills, but it's close enough to the spiracle that fresh water will actually flow over the eye and give it some oxygen, and it will flow over the brain too and give it some oxygen. So a shark doesn't have to just breathe through its gills. It can breathe through its skin-like tissues too. Frogs the same way. Right, so that's the circulatory system. The one last cut you want to make that's kind of cool is that you're going to cut the shark's heart open. So we see that tube coming out of the top. There's another tube going in down here. You see the two tubes? You're going to try and cut right in the middle. Nip. And you can open it up. And if you want to try and hold it, you have two more pins. Pen. Here's a pen. Remember, don't put it towards your finger. I can stick it there. I can pull this side back and I can stick it here too. Oop. Oh, it ripped. That's not so good. Weak heart, but I can hold it like this. So here you can see the chamber, the hollow part. Here you can see kind of where I cut it a little bit, you can see the second chamber is right in here. So I have a chamber up here at the top and I have a chamber down here. As blood comes in, it goes into an area called the atrium. I pause because in a shark, it's also called an auricle, which humans have one too, but we call the main chamber an atria. Then it'll go to the ventricle, the large chamber, and then it shoots out of the heart. So blood will come back here without oxygen, go into the heart, to the little chamber in the back, the atria. It's kind of look good on the top, depending on the perspective. Then it gets pushed down into the ventricle, and then it gets pushed out to these. We call those efferent arterioles. So first into the aorta, and then these branches that come off are efferent arterioles. Picks up oxygen. This blood coming from the heart, remember, is deoxygenated. It picks up oxygen in the gills, and then it goes all to the rest of the body. So that little tiny heart has to actually squeeze really hard to get blood flow. If you look at the side, you can see like a dark stripe. Clean it off a little bit. Mine has that yellow goo on it. You see a dark stripe going right down here. If you look at the other side, you have the same dark stripe. And we call that the lateral because it's on the side, abdominal because it's around the abdomen, and vein. So veins are returning blood flow back up towards the heart. So here we're bringing blood flow to the heart, over and in. Arteries, like this one, the aorta, carry blood flow out. So going right down the center, you see a dark red artery carrying blood flow out and down. All right. But a shark's blood's a lot like ours. It actually has a lot of red blood cells like we do, which is kind of unique to carry a lot of oxygen. It has an immune system similar to us with white blood cells that function a lot like ours. So sharks are really a lot like us. And on page 23, it was just another diagram of the circulation. You can see those blue and red blood vessels and where they're going. The picture at the top is more like yours where they're not colored. So you see a lot of the gray, and that gray are the gills, and you can see some of the tubes going in and out, blood vessels. Right, let's follow the digestive system. You want to pull these pins out of the heart from the side. Take your probe. We'll start at the beginning. It's usually the best place to start. So we'll start up here where the mouth is at. Let's say it swallows a fish. Fish goes through the mouth, towards the back. Be careful as you do this, but you can wiggle it. If you feel like you're hitting something and it stops because the tip of this probe is sharp, oops, you can always use the back of your tweezers or the front and wiggle it a little bit. I can feel that wiggle. I'll just lift. I can see it coming down. Right there. So I see it right here. I'm going to lift all the internal organs I can up and over. Whoops, let's get that on my table. I'm looking in. So I'm going to pretend I'm a fish again. Because I put the tweezers in it, gave me a little bit more room. I can put my finger in, my pinky in, and you can do this if you want. My pinky's inside the shark's mouth. It's coming down. You see it? It's coming into this big Well, mine's pretty firm. I think there might be something in there. So my pinky is coming down. This part that I'm going into right now, I cut the mouth cavity open. It's called the esophagus. It's where you swallow food. In the esophagus, and you don't have grippiness like a shark does. The shark has papilla, little lines for its esophagus. So if you want, you can cut those. Stick the scissors in, follow, clip, follow, clip, follow, clip. Now you can see them. See the little lines? So here's your esophagus, this little tube back here. See the grippy lines? So one of the benefits is if something goes in, it's grabbed, and those grippy lines actually have muscle lining, and it can start pushing down. So the force of water will push things in there. The grippy lines, the muscles, they're called papilla, will pull it down. Then it goes into what's next. When you swallow, where are you trying to get the food into? Stomach. So this whole thing's the stomach. It's kind of shaped like a J, kind of curves a little bit. Sometimes I think anatomists exaggerate their letters a little bit when they say something's S-shaped or J-shaped. But unlike ours comes down and then it kind of turns more to the side and then shifts down again. Why do you think a shark's would be so long and straight? Think of what it's trying to eat first. Trying to eat whole fish typically, like big bites of fish. So it's forcing down and it's going to have that water flow helping push it. So it's designed to be along your stomach, way down here. You can cut open the stomach and keep following. All these yellow lines are actually blood flow also. So they injected with red and it looks like mostly yellow dyes, but that's blood going all over the stomach, the blood pathway. So we're going to cut it down. We're going to see if there's anything in your stomachs. Oh, disappointed. I was sure there was going to be a fish in there. So there you go. Open it up. Pretty sweet. Did you just grimace, Scout? Were you disgusted by this? Are you serious? So the beginning of papilla for the esophagus. Then as you start getting down in here, you can see the stretch. These big folds are called rugae. So they're the grippy papilla. Rugae are designed so that, and these aren't as flexible as a living shark, they're designed so that as a shark eats more food, they can stretch out. It's wider and wider. So papilla, rugae. Following down. And you can kind of see where it pinches, nice and long tube, and then it pinches a little bit right here. You're going to stop there. If you come back up here, do you remember what these were? These big things were the liver. So your liver and the shark's liver is for cleaning up and processing, stuff that gets into your blood. The liver also makes a chemical called bile, and it stores it in a little thing called the gallbladder. Oh no, my gallbladder is not very bold. Usually it's very green. So it should be sitting right here. Oh, nuts. Looks like this shark must have had gallbladder removal surgery. I'm joking. I know a lot of doctors that are sharks, but I don't know a shark doctor. Right, so you can kind of see the tube here, but that's what I was getting you to look at. Underneath the liver is a little tiny pouch that's called a gallbladder, and it should be right in here, but I'm not seeing mine at all. And it's usually a little more green. So it's technically like a yellowish green, and it's full of a chemical called bile that helps you digest fat. So if you follow that tube all the way down, You see here it kind of hanging, kind of hanging, kind of hanging. All the way down. There it is. And it goes into this next section. So we had the esophagus, the stomach. After that, we have small intestine. This very first section of the small intestine, where that bile duct, we call it bile duct because it's a tube or a duct, it carries the bile down to where your food's going to be to digest fats. Fish are very fatty in a good way. So one of the benefits to a shark eating a lot of fatty fish is that it keeps the oils for itself, and oil likes to float. So where they don't have a float bladder, they actually have more oil in them to help them float a little bit. They still can't stop because they'll start sinking, but it gives them a little bit more buoyancy is the word that they use. Right? So this goes all the way down to the intestine. You can see the very first part of the intestine where it connects to is called the duodenum. Humans have three parts of small intestine. You have a duodenum, where you do most of your food digesting and processing. You also have this bile duct going in, so you can digest fats. You can live without the gallbladder. You just can't eat fats as much because of it. Off to the side, you'll have a little tiny pancreas. Where's my pancreas? Here it is. So here's what you saw from the front. It's not this thing. This darker thing here is a spleen. A spleen helps process old red blood cells. Underneath, though, if you fold it open, can you see it right through here? Here's a darker, kind of a reddish brown spleen. If you lift the spleen and the intestines, this guy right here is your pancreas, that little strip. And yours is designed a lot the same way. It's a little strip of tissue that comes up and connects just under the stomach. So ours lays underneath the stomach. This is a straight line because most things in the intestine or the inside of the shark are straight up and down. So if I look at that pancreas, you can see it comes up, and it's attaching at just about the same spot as the bile duct. And that's the way that we work too. So our bile duct puts fat processing chemical called bile into our small intestine. Your pancreas, one of its jobs is to put protein and sugar, digesting enzymes into it. So they all come together, and that's where you digest most of your food, is right there in the beginning of the small intestine. You can cut that open too if you want. Small intestine, cut, let's do it. Snip, snip, snip. And you can see the rugae continue, same idea. You just have a tiny piece of muscle that separates them. So this little thing is called a pyloric sphincter. Sphincter is a round muscle like a valve. So when they swallow the fish initially, it's tough, it's undigested. They can do a little here, and when it gets more smushy and mushed, then this little muscle will open up and push it down into the small intestine. So up here, it's really just breaking it down with things like stomach acid and enzymes. It's getting no nutrients here. When it gets down in here, the small intestine will take nutrients, put it into the blood, and bring it up to the liver so you can use it. And there was the spleen. We can go around the corner here. Swoop, swoop, swoop. Bump, 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 bump. And now we're going to go. There's another section of the small intestine called the spiral small intestine, and that's all of this. So most of your food starts getting processed at the beginning of the small intestine, but now it needs to get absorbed. You have to be able to get all those nutrients that you ate into your blood. So if we open this up, you see, like I said, all the spirals going down. It's not a corkscrew on the inside, it's just the way that that line looks, makes it look spirally. We can cut straight through, cut straight through, cut straight through, cut straight through. And there you go. So your small intestine also has folds like these. And the reason it has all these folds, these are just extensions of the intestine. The reason it has these folds is that the food will push here and kind of weave over it, weave in between, and it slows the food movement down through here. It's not a whole fish anymore. It's actually like baby food when it gets down here, chunky baby food. So it smushes in between each of these little folds of tissue. And this isn't so that the intestine can stretch out, it's so that you have more surface, more food touches the surface and gets absorbed. The less surface you have, the less you can absorb. So you have all these spiral folds to absorb food. It's kind of like a bumblebee back here, a wasp. And then here's another thing that makes us a lot different. So we have a small intestine, and then it goes into a what? I'll give you a hint. Anytime you have a structure that's small, you always have one that's large, right? So our large intestine would normally curve back up and bring the food substance back up towards our stomach, and then over, and then down. Most of the processing is done in the shark by here. The shark doesn't absorb all the nutrients. It just needs to get food in fast, squish it through, and get rid of it. So right here, you can kind of feel it. Squishy, squishy, muscle. Right there is where it changes to the large intestine, or they call it the colon. So the large intestine starts about here and then goes to the, anyway, remember the C word for this opening? It's called the cloaca. So the colon goes over to the cloaca. And the colon's where it gets excreted from the body. Colon, cloaca, out. So this structure also attached to. Did anybody have boys? I didn't notice. Not sure. So with boys, right here by the cloaca, you'll find two little round sacs. They're called sperm sacs. And there'll be a tube that runs all the way up here to where the sperm reproductive structures are made. This sac, all the way up here, is actually an ovary. So since I have a girl, this is where the eggs are made for the girl. And then the babies will grow in that. And this will actually be longer. And the baby sharks will start developing in here. They'll be moved down, and then they'll start growing inside the belly. And if they're eggs, so sharks are interesting because some sharks lay eggs, just like other fish or a frog or a chicken. Some sharks have babies just like us, where they're never really an egg. They just grow inside the belly. And the third type is half-half, where they'll make the eggs, they'll fertilize the eggs or make it so that they're usable eggs. The eggs will grow inside the mom, and then they'll hatch inside the mom and be released. It's not like a frog, where a frog lays an egg, the egg hatches outside and the pond becomes a tadpole. There's actually one really gross thing that some sharks do, like the tiger shark. Tiger shark will have babies in here, baby sharks, but it'll have 50 of them in this ovary, or the sac, uterus. The end of this is called the uterus. So it'll have 50 baby sharks in here. And the first shark to get 4 inches long inside of here will eat the rest of the other sharks. So over a year, even though there were 50 baby sharks over here on this side, that one shark is the only one that'll be born because it ate all the other ones. And on the other side, I have the same ovary and uterus. So I have one over here too, if you can see it, right here. So the same thing happens on this side. I'll get 50 baby sharks growing over here, and this one baby shark will eat the other ones. These two can't touch each other, so when they're born at about the same time. And so this shark, even though she had 100 babies inside of her at one time, only has 2 sharks. Crazy. Right, so now we've opened up, we looked all the way through the digestive system. You can play an experiment. You can count the number of rows of teeth. I kind of looked at mine. It looked like it had 3 rows of teeth. So if you start all the way at the beginning, you can look at the taste buds. You can follow the papilla in the esophagus. You can look at the rugae in the stomach. You can follow it down, transitioning to the small intestine. You can see the spiral wall of the small intestine. You can follow it down. And then here's a sphincter right here. Remember, there's a sphincter up here too. It goes into the large intestine, and the poo, fish remains, come out the cloaca. Sorry. So that's kind of the walkthrough of the path. If you look down here, at the end of the tail, everybody's tail got cut. You look at the tip of it, you can see right there's the body of one of the vertebrae. So like your spine, you have a body, it's kind of a round structure that gives it support, kind of like a Lego building block. Right below it, kind of hard to see, but you're welcome to cut up here if you want later. There's a little tiny hole here, the tip. And there's a little tiny hole right below it, which is almost impossible to see on this one. But you'll have the body of the vertebra and then two holes. The hole closest is an artery, and the hole below it is a vein. So you've got these major blood vessels that are coming all the way down to the tail to keep the tail alive. We cover pretty much every structure all the way down to fish. Does anybody have any questions or things you want to poke or cut at? Do you want to unmute it? Can you do that?
Yeah.
Awesome. Mine are really
Yeah.
getting to that point.
Not sharp anymore.
Yep. So you're being recorded. I can hear everything you say. So be careful the things you say. If you're going to say something gross, don't say it.
You can open the fan. You don't. Why would you want to do? There's nothing. It has. You just want to cut. Like you're not.
Daddy.
Yep.
Oh, there's Daddy.
Yeah, everybody can hear you. So some other things you might be curious to do. You can cut the muscles. I'm curious about it. I'm cutting the muscles down here. I'm going closer to the fin.
No. Watch what he's doing. Right now we're using these ones.
And then I'm going under the skin again. And here I can separate if I pull my pin out for a second. Separate the muscles all the way down to the fin. Can you see the muscles under there?
You can tear it up. Now you can tear the muscle up. So follow that.
I'm sliding underneath muscles and I'm separating. I don't know if you've ever done this. It's kind of like chicken. If you eat a chicken leg and you pull the different muscles apart as you're eating it,
Now I'm gonna.
you get the different layers. But this is kind of cool because now I can see the muscles going into the fin.
All right. Oh.
Like this muscle right here that goes to the bottom of the fin pulls the fin down. So we actually call it the pectoral fin depressor. When you depress something, you push it down. Pectoral fin depressor. If you have a depressor on the other side, if we were to cut this open, you actually have an elevator that lifts it up. It's the opposite. I think muscles are kind of cool, so I had to cut down there. Doesn't look like anybody's saying, hey, let's cut this open. So I'm going to let my curiosity go to the last place. Unpin your shark. Put your pins safely in the pad, remember. Don't just leave them around. So once you pull all your pins out, you should have 6 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pins. All safely poked into the pad.
Yeah. Yeah, we're just on the.
I don't know what.
Let's flip it over
Rip everything in.
and let's cut an eyeball.
Oh, yeah!
Hashtag winning. Yes.
Okay.
So the easiest way to get to the eyeball without damaging the eyeball is if you take the scissors. Remember, water flows into the spherical. Part of it will flow over the eyeball, over the brain, and then the rest of it flows down to the mouth. So if we take the spherical and cut, snip, and we're going to cut towards the center. Cut, cut.
What is that?
I'm actually just curving around. You can feel kind of a crunch. That's the chondrocranium. Full.
Right in there.
Boom, cut right to the nose.
There's a lot of blood. There's not a lot of blood.
Yep, little bites. If you're trying to bite a lot at one time, it's going to be really tough. Right, so now I cut that open. Now I can get my fingers in there and kind of spread it. Put my scissors in. You can actually use the scissors. If you push them in and open them, the lever, right? Boom.
Oh, I'm in the eye. Oof. Did not mean to go
killed
that
the
far.
eye.
I didn't kill it. I just like,
through the nose, right?
You have to see what he's
Okay. So I spread it, and now I'm just kind of peeling, like if you're eating crab,
Kind of peeling.
peel it, yeah. Just like you're eating crab,
it does
peel
feel
it
like.
back.
I want to do it. I want to do it.
All right. Be careful of the eyeball.
Right. So there's the eyeball. I just peeled back over the eyeball. Remember, they have an eyelid, but it's down the bottom, so up on the top, you're not going to see that.
What is that?
But there you see the skeleton. Here you see the shape of the eyeball. You're going to see a bunch of little things off the eyeball. So you're going to see little muscles that stick off. You're going to see a big tube off the back right here. This is really the first thing you really want to find is this tube. And right off the back of the eyeball, there's a thick, fleshy tube, the optic nerve. Probably one of the most famous things about the eyeball. The optic nerve. You can see more of the little muscles, like down here, that help control. Muscle up here that accidentally got broken. And what I'm going to do is now that I can safely cut around my eyeball without damaging anything, I'm going to cut right up the middle of the head.
We're not using those.
Yes, we are.
Because I want to see the brain. There we go. Cut. Oh yeah, soft. A little crunch. I can feel it. Crunch.
Crunch.
There's the guy. That's it.
And then I'm just putting my scissors inside of it, turning them sideways and opening.
That's not the best way to do it.
Peel it apart. Put it inside, twist it. I can feel it kind of peel back. Peel. Got it. Jackpot. I mean, I heard the crackle of the thing. Open, open, open. I can see the inside. These little things go off to the side are nerves. More nerves. Just like us, we have nerves that go to every sensation.
Here through. That is just-
Peeling it back, peeling it back.
You've got brain.
Somebody found the brain? Yeah.
Let's fix the brain.
You just got juice all over the computer screen.
There's like a drop on the computer. It's my
Oh,
computer.
yeah, it's gonna happen.
That was done.
Wait a minute. Where's it at?
I have no
I
idea.
don't even know what it looks like.
I just cut a little more of the skin off.
This is
So I'm kind of wiggling under, I'm wiggling under the pulling the skin and opening. And
Yeah. I'm like my little friend all over me. I'm taking a shower. All right.
So here you can see I saved the top of my skull, the chondrocranium. It's kind of clear, but it's hard. So if I tap it, I can hear it tapping. You can kind of see the brain inside of that if you didn't already cut through it. Here's a piece of the brain. Here's a piece of the brain. The brain in the shark's not quite like the human brain where it's a big lump. It's actually more like a chain of marbles.
Finger in the brain of a shark. Those are
Cut a little bit more. Cut a little bit more.
I just want to get this eye out. That's all you're
Trying not to destroy the brain while I go in.
Okay then.
I got it!
Well,
The eye, I just wanted to
you
get
just
it
wanted to
out.
get that out. I don't even know why. I mean, don't get me wrong. Cows are really pretty once you scoop on the inside.
I'm gonna cut it all the way down.
I'm gonna keep doing that to myself.
The complete eye without being popped.
Yeah.
Here we go. So I cut the side. I put my round tip in. I cut just the bone, Sorry, cartilage. You can see the brain being exposed. I do it again. I can see the brain, so I'm going to be really careful and cut. Outside. Wiggle in just a little bit. Your brain is super squishy and it can shift a little bit around in your skull, and so can a shark's brain. So if you push the scissors in a little bit, it should wiggle just a little bit.
What are you? Stop!
See? It works now. It's a functioning camera.
Eyeball. Here, slit the. Here, I'll do it. Let's see if it comes out when you.
You're just cutting with this point.
No, you're just trying. I'm trying to open this thing up.
Totally.
No.
I know you want to do what I'm doing.
Our brain suffers. And we're,
I look cooler.
oh my God. No, that is not a good idea.
You're gonna make me top it. Mom hasn't took a picture yet.
Last time, I accidentally broke an eyeball. It was not a pretty scene. So let's not.
I see a little bit of blood.
Okay. So if you look, here my brain's pretty much exposed. What's interesting is this big lump in the back is actually called the cerebellum. You have one too, but it's a small bump in the back of your brain. Cerebellum is more for balance and coordination. So this helps coordinate all these fins and all the muscles to move fast, quick, help attack the prey. Pull that back. Then I have the cerebrum, which is up here. And the cerebrum's more like the advanced brain. That's what you think with when you plan your day and do all those advanced thoughts. So the cerebrum of a shark is actually weight-wise about the same as the cerebellum. So it does a lot of muscle control, but it also thinks quite a bit. And there's a big debate on whether what sharks do are mostly instinct or if they're actually intelligent. There have been studies that show that sharks can process. They can consider different situations and choose a better one, not just because of food, but for other situations. So they're somewhat intelligent. If we go a little bit further up here, you can see this rounded area. That's the olfactory bulb. So when we were talking about smell before, and I talked about how sensitive it is, you can see how huge this is. And that will send the signals down and into the brain. You see the pathway goes down into the bottom part of the brain. Let's take that eyeball out. I'm just cleaning up the tissue around the eyeball to make sure I'm not going to cut anything I don't want, because I want to take the whole eyeball out. Now I can wiggle my scissors underneath, spread them a little bit, wiggle underneath, spread them, wiggle them underneath and spread them. That way I'm not cutting anything, I'm just letting the, it's called fascia, it's the tissue that holds things in place. I'm letting that rip. So now you can see I'm completely underneath the eyeball. Coming to the back, I have the nerves and the muscles. So I'm just going to cut the nerves and the muscles. Boop, boop. Now my eyeball is completely free. Oh, there's a muscle still on the bottom. I'll get that one. Snip. Now my eyeball is ready. Oh, one more muscle. I'll cut it down low so we can still see where they connect. There we go. Hopefully now you can see the back of the eye. Here we are again. You can see these kind of pinkish, maybe pink's not the best word, peach colored, I guess. Those are all muscles. There's the optic nerve, kind of white in color. It's that tube, cut it pretty close to the eye. And then there's another muscle. So you should have 6 muscles altogether. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, missing one. Where's the last one? But when you think about the eyeball itself and how it moves, it has to be able to move in different directions. So you have a muscle, you have a set of muscles that will pull it down and up. You have a set of muscles that will pull it to the left and right. And then you actually have a set of muscles that will turn it. And you don't think about your eyeball being able to spin like that, but it does spin just a little bit. Like when you're falling down, the eyeball has to spin a little bit so you can see where you're going. Boom. And I just cut the extra tissue off. Now I have shark eyeball. Shark eyeball. Here are my muscles. There's my little nerve, optic nerve. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Ah, there they are. This one was hiding down here. All right. Everybody get the eyeball out? Anybody still working on the eyeball? We're about to cut it open and take the lens out. Oh, Genevieve already did it. Not patient at all. The kid has practice. All right. So if you look right in the center, that's the pupil. That's where light goes in. Another unique thing, fish don't have the ability to adjust the iris, which is the colored part, most fish, but a shark does. So the iris, like when you look in a bright light, your iris gets real small to let less light in. When you're in the dark, it gets huge. Sharks can do the same thing. So when they're in darker light water, they can adjust how much light gets in. It's really unique for a fish. You can see the lens right there. Normally it's soft. Once they die, it gets cloudy. So normally it's clear and soft. So if you get that wrinkle going again, snip it. There we go. Careful when you snip it. If you're squeezing hard, it might squirt. Just let you know. It's like a grape. So we're in. You can see I'm underneath. So this clear part on the top that I'm underneath is called the cornea. It's the first thing light passes through. I'm going to turn my scissors sideways and I'm going to cut the cornea all the way open. So I'm inside the cornea, snip. Go in again, snip. Back here, snip. So now the eyeball is cut in half. Open up. This little thing back here, it's kind of a shiny layer. It doesn't look so shiny, but it's more gray right now. Is also unique. Have you ever seen a cat in the dark? If you look at it, what's its eyes look like? Eerie, right? They reflect back. Your dog will do the same thing. Anything that needs to move outside at night, when you shine a light in their eyes, it bounces light back because it has a special layer at the very back. It's called the tapetum lucidum. It means the light tint. Light goes into the eye, goes to the back, hits that shiny tapetum, and then bounces back. So they actually see everything twice. They see it once the first time going through, and then they see it a second time as like it's bounced back. So they can see at least twice as good in the dark that we can. If you shine a light in someone's eye really quick, a human's eye, what color do you usually see? Red. Because we don't have that. We have a layer of blood vessels back there, and when you shine the light in, it bounces off the blood, which is red, and gives you that red look. That's why all humans, when you take a camera flash, we don't have enough time to respond. That's why we have red eye in old pictures, because the light bounces back. Depending on what your animal is, if you have a cat or a dog, depending on what kind of dog or what kind of cat, that reflection is different. Like I know miniature schnauzers, they're like a tealish color. My dog, I have a Bouvier, hers is orange. But there's the lens. That little marbly thing, it's kind of hard. When you're alive, it's really squishy. So that you can adjust it. You can make it flat or make it fat and round, depending on whether you need to see something up close or far away. And that's the lens. That's kind of the important parts of the eyeball. The cornea is the outside part that you see through. The lens that adjusts the light so you can see things better. The tapetum, that silvery gray thing in the back. Right behind it, or sorry, right in front of it technically, is the retina, and it's a dark layer that's full of rods and cones so you see color. Sharks also see color, which is unique. All right. So now I think we've exposed everything we could possibly expose, unless we were to cut open the meat and just check out muscles and check out the muscles, but seems like maybe too much.
I would just
Right, so I unmuted you again if you have any questions.
Cut everything. We gotta cut everything.
swear to God, Brent, I will pick you out right now. You do not knock it off. I mean it. I will force this bloody eyeball down your throat.
Everybody gets a chance to cut the eyeball open? Nice. Everybody get a chance to see the brain? Did you touch the brain?
Yeah.
So the first time when I was still in college,
Suffer because of Brent.
The first time I got a chance to touch a brain and spinal cord, I was so excited, and I couldn't believe how soft and squishy it was. And this is disgusting, but I actually took my glove off and I touched it. Don't do that. Your fingers are going to stink really bad. But it's just so weird. It's like touching soft butter. You can see if you wanted to cut back. Whatever you want to do with the shark at this point, you can. You could cut.
On my glasses.
You could cut the spine. You could actually look at the spine. We saw it down here at the tip of the tail, but you can see what it's like here. It's up to you.
No.
Can we try this?
I'm doing this.
Nope.
The last thing you want to do is clean your area up. So when you're throwing things away, make sure that all of your pins, again, you need to know where all your sharps are all the time. Make sure all your 6 pins are tucked completely in the pad so they won't go through it.
Dirty.
You should have a wood probe, a pair of scissors,
Inside?
No.
a pair of tweezers,
Side of it.
I'm moving my clothes.
You're weird.
manual. I would throw the pen away too. If you touched it, it's gross.
Yeah, you touched the pen.
Of course I touched the pen. I was taking notes.
You wasted it.
Throwing everything, so slide the tray.
Boop.
The way the
I'm so sorry.
Crack it off.
And then don't forget, in your sink, you have the bag.
with bag.
No, it's not job.
Yep. And then you have the trash bag.
No, get our bag. We have to put
So,
it.
before you take your gloves or anything else off, you want to make sure that everything goes in to that trash bag.
There's a pen on the floor. I can't get it.
Well, I wanted to talk about it.
And I think we put larger trash bag, a second trash bag into some of the kits. So I'm not sure if you got it or not. But then the whole fish, you're done.
No. That's what Mom said to you. Mom, we need a trash bag.
The whole fish can go into the bag, tied up, and into the trash.
We keep it right. You can
Also, I called the proper.
So now you have it all contained, put in the trash. And then the only thing you have to do is take your PPE off. So, whoops, I ripped my glove. You're going to take your apron off, put that in the trash. Take your goggles off, put those in the trash. And the last thing you take off is your hands, because now everything's off of you. To take this off, don't touch your skin. Touch where the roll is at, right here. So you can either grab the roll or grab on your wrist. It's kind of sticky. Not your skin wrist, but the wrist of your glove like this. And pull it up and put your fingers into it like this. So I haven't touched any of my skin. I peel this completely off. This hand's clean. Roll this like a golf ball. Take this clean finger and go under the glove. So now I'm in the clean area with clean fingers, and I'll just pull the whole glove over, turning it inside out. Bloop, and everything's wrapped up, nice and clean. I can touch anything out here because it's all clean. Throw that in the trash, close the trash can, and you're all done. Back to me. And that's everything. Thanks for being patient and going through what was longer than we expected, but that was a great practice run. It was a lot of fun, and I hope you guys had fun too. And hopefully we'll see you in-house for our STEAM events here on site or other STEAM events that we sent home. Everybody have a great day.